All right, let's see if this is any better. Test, 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 test. This thing's crazy. Got my chat here at least. Let me just write something into the chat. Hello, everybody. How do I sound? Let's get this party started. Test, 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 test. Boy, it sure would be nice if they would let me adjust my microphone. This thing really sucks. It really sucks. It's not intuitive at all. There's no information about what I'm doing here. Joy's bedtime story read along. Oh, good there, Joy. Let's do a little experiment here, Joy. I want to see if you hear me through the microphone or through my laptop, okay? Can you hear me better like this? Or can you hear me better like this? Thank you, Michael. Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's do it then. I'm going to get started. I'll be checking the chat here and following that along. I wasn't even seeing the chat the last time. While I go through this. And thank you for being here, by the way. Happy Thursday, everybody. This is Season 3, Episode 46 of the Last Symptom podcast. This is the season finale of the third season. And I'm Brian Barnett, the creator and host of The Last Symptom. Hope you're all doing well, especially Michael and Joy, who are here joining me on the YouTube live chat right now. This episode marks the final episode of the third season. I can't believe it. How do you feel about that? It's just astonishing. 3 years. I mean, about to go into the fourth year. It's unbelievable. Well, before we get into kind of a review over the year, I wanted to mention, because this show is going to be broadcast on, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that. This show is going to be broadcast on all the podcast platforms. But I thought that because it's the last season of this, or the last episode of this season, that it'd be fun to do it like this. Hey, we got Dickie from Australia. Hey there, Dickie. Happy to see you. So those of you folks who are listening to this on whatever podcast platform you usually listen to The Last Symptom, I just want you to know that every once in a while I'm going to be checking in with the folks that are here on the live stream. Thank you, Penny. Appreciate that. But I do have a show to give everybody. And what I'll do from time to time is I'll be interacting with folks on the chat. At the same time, I'm presenting a show to you folks on the podcast. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to do kind of a review of the highlights of this whole season, this whole past year for this season of the Last Symptom podcast, and kind of refresh our memories on some of the things we talked about. As I mentioned, because I'm doing a live stream for this, we're going to have some possible live interactions. I'm watching the chat pretty zealously, make sure I don't miss anything anybody's saying. And I got a couple of campfire stories for you at the end of today's show. So, I can't finish off the season without giving you a couple of really funny or good stories. So let's get started here. What were some of the topics we discussed over this past season? Let's, you and I, take a walk down memory lane and mention just some of the highlights. In the first episode of this season of the Last Symptom podcast, that episode was titled, "You Are Not a Car." And we started off the season talking about the nature of your worth as a person. How your worth as a person is not rooted in the same sorts of things that we typically use to value things, such as houses. I think I even used the example of a house, or cars. And if you'll remember, we talked about how the standards in reasoning that we use to measure the value of material things around us can make it really difficult, especially if we're unhealthy and we're trying to escape these unhealthy misperceptions and misconceptions about inherent worth. Being surrounded by the nature of how we evaluate things like cars and houses can make it difficult for us to escape applying this same sort of reasoning to ourselves. That was in the first episode. It's totally appropriate when you're evaluating a car to use this sort of reasoning on that car. The car, as soon as you drive it off the lot, it loses its worth. In fact, cars get their worth from external sources, such as the number of people who desire that particular car. If you don't believe me, go to the junkyard. Those cars in the junkyard lack so much worth that they sell them by the piece, not by the whole car. That's how little their value is. So, an older a car gets, and the fewer people who desire that particular car, the less value that car has. Think about BMWs and a Lexus. Why can they charge what they charge for those things? Is it really because of the luxury? Well, some of it's that. But if they put all the luxury they wanted into a car and nobody still wanted it, you know what I'm saying? If they put all the luxury they wanted into a car and still nobody wanted that car, it wouldn't be worth what it's worth. So when we're talking about cars, it's the number of people who desire that car that gives that car its value. And the older the car gets, if it gets a ding in the door or something like that, or if it needs serious parts replaced, has too many miles driven on it. Once you get over 100,000 miles, boom, there goes lots of things. Value drops. Good luck getting warranties and stuff like that. So we're surrounded by that type of value system in life. And, homes too, their value can go down and they can go up. And that can happen with something as minimal as planting a tree. Think about that. The value of your home can go up or go down with something as minimal as you planting a tree or not, and where you plant that tree and what kind of tree you plant. So we're surrounded by that type of reasoning when it comes to worth. By the way, I mentioned a junkyard just a little while ago. I don't even know if they still exist. I need a part for my Jeep for my glove box. Just need a latch. And I was thinking, I could run to the junkyard and pull that out of a Jeep real easy and have that fixed in an afternoon. Probably cost me $5. And then my next thought was, Barnett, how long has it been since you've seen a junkyard? It's been decades. I don't even think they exist anymore. Maybe you folks have seen them. Maybe where you live, you have junkyards. I don't think we do in this area no more. And I think the reason for that is because auto parts stores are so numerous right now that they've probably made junkyards obsolete. So you could probably buy the parts now, brand new, for about the same price as you used to be able to get them at a junkyard. So again, we're talking about value. Yeah, Penny went to a junkyard. Penny's down there a little bit further south than I am, and she has a junkyard. I might have to go down to your junkyard, Penny. But you see the point. Value for material things is based on how many people want that thing. And the fewer people who want it or need it, well, then there goes your value. It goes right out the window, doesn't it? A car's value, any material thing, depends on people wanting it. But this is not how human value works. And that's a difficult point for a lot of us who have been raised in unhealthy families, because that was the lesson we learned. We learned we have to earn our value, just like that car needs people desiring it to have value. We were raised thinking that that human worth also works on that same principle, and it does not. So where does our value come from? It comes from the fact that we're human beings. People struggle with that. It's contrary to the model that they've been raised with and that they look around in the world and see being used all over the place. But it's true. Your value as a person comes from just the fact that you're a person. So this value is based on what we are. And because you never stop being a person, think about it. You're never more of a human being one moment than you are another moment. You're never more of a human being when you're 37 than you were when you were 6, right? You've always been a human being. You always will be a human being. Your value as a human being is consistent. It never wavers, never goes up and down. It never depreciates. You break your neck. Now you're in a wheelchair. If that happened to a car, it gets smashed in a car accident, its value goes. But that doesn't happen to people when they become paraplegics, because just because they're a paraplegic does not mean that somehow they're no longer a person. You see, your inherent value as a person is based on what you are, not on your condition. So that we discussed all that in the first episode of this season of the Last Symptom podcast. The second episode was also very important. And I've noticed this week that, at least on YouTube, it is the most watched video I have ever published. Episode number 2 of the third season was called 5 Facets of Authentic Love and Confronting Parents. So I don't know why it's so popular. Is it so popular because I talked about the 5 facets of authentic love? Or is it so popular because people wanted to know how to confront their parents, or if to confront their parents? Well, you folks know I don't. But it is the most popular video that I've ever published on YouTube. By the way, speaking of YouTube, one of the reasons I decided to do this live stream on YouTube is because I crossed 1,000 subscribers for the first time in the last couple of days, and kind of happy about that. It took a long time. And, for me, it's not about the number of people who are subscribed. It's about the quality of people who are subscribed. And where many other channels might zoom past 1,000 in a day, they might have 30,000 million followers. I would rather have 1,000 really serious good people than have a million indifferent people, and I feel like the folks who are following the last symptom right now are serious people. And so I appreciate that. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much. So, second episode, talked about 5 facets of authentic love confronting parents. Do you remember that I explained what a facet is? That's not really a word we use much in today's world. But a facet is a term that a jeweler might use a lot because it's the angles that are cut on a finished gemstone or a diamond. So if you've got a diamond ring, they don't give it to you just rough. A jeweler, I don't know, who specifically has the job of doing this, but somebody sculpts that diamond to make it look as beautiful as it ends up looking. And each angle or cut on the diamond is a facet. So that's what a facet is. And it's interesting that all of the facets together, when you put them all together, that's what makes the beautiful diamond or gemstone, right? It's not just you put in one facet and boom, the diamond or the gemstone is finished. You're ready to put it into a ring or something. So the diamond or the gemstone depends on all these facets in order to make up the finished sculpted gemstone or diamond. And we talked about how authentic love is like this, right? It requires all 5 of its fundamental facets in order to exist at all. If it's only got 4, it's not a finished gemstone. So a person may excel at a few of these facets that make up authentic love. But as long as a person is being obstructed from naturally experiencing all 5 facets that love requires together, you don't end up with a gemstone. So that is to say, it can't be said that a person is experiencing authentic love. And, people have all sorts of ideas, notions about what love is. And 99.999% of them are based on what they've seen in movies, they've read in books and those sorts of things. Poetry. I love poetry. But knowing what I know now, I can read poetry and go, the person, even though they're feeling really profound things and it's prompting this beautiful poetry, the expressions here are not reflective of authentic love. Love, these superficial, inferior alternatives to love, may be fueled by many, many unhealthy things. But anyway, I won't get into the whole discussion here tonight. So, in episode 2 of this season, I not only went into specific detail what each of these 5 facets are that create love or that love depends on, but I also explained what one has to do if they're not naturally experiencing any one of the 5. And I also went into great detail explaining what would prevent a person from naturally experiencing any one of the 5. And that's an important term, naturally experiencing. You see, when there's anything like that, let's take um, empathy, right? If a person can't naturally experience empathy, which is a natural human quality, uh, if a person can't naturally experience that, the only thing it can mean is that something is obstructing them from being able to experience something that they should naturally be able to experience. So I went into that discussion about natural obstructions in that second episode. So, let's say you're not interested in the facets of love. You might listen to it anyway, just because I did go into that discussion about things that can naturally obstruct us from naturally being able to experience things that as people we should, just as a natural result of being a healthy person, be able to experience. In the third episode, I tried to offer some encouragement while at the same time sharing with you folks how I view praise that I sometimes receive for the last symptom work. In episode 4, I made a special announcement and I revealed plans for a brand new resource that I had hoped would benefit people for years to come. It wasn't quite finished by this episode 4, but I went ahead and made the announcement because I was so excited about it. And that was the Last Symptom Fundamentals pre-recorded 2-week online course. And that's been available at thelastsymptom.com ever since. If you've been on the fence about taking this course, let me again just encourage you that if it's within your financial means to take the course, please seriously consider doing it. If it's beyond your financial means, get in touch with me. Let's work something out. And, you don't have to go into detail about exactly the nature of your financial difficulties because I'm not a bank and I'm also not out to violate your privacy or make you suffer any more humiliation than you might already be dealing with. Michael says he's going to take the course. Well, I hope you do, Michael, and thank you for that. Like I say, I don't want anybody who's under financial difficulty to suffer any humiliation at all. But, most of you who know my story, you've heard me talk about having to carry in coins into the Stop and Shop in New England. Chinga, 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 chinga. And right up in front of the whole grocery store. So they don't even tuck it in a corner, where you can kind of like go and do it quietly. No, they put you right up front. And I had to do that for years. It was humiliating. So the idea of me, really feeling like something could benefit me, but me having to reach out to somebody and tell them that I'm broke, I feel that humiliation. I don't want anybody else to have to go through that. So all I'm asking is that if you're under financial difficulty and you would really like to take the Last Symptom Fundamentals course, I'm not out to get rich off this. It does support my work, but I'm not out to get rich off of it. What I would like you to do is to be honest with yourself. Reach out to me. Just say, listen, I'm under financial difficulty, but I would like to take the course. That's all the details I need. But the one thing I would like you to keep in mind is that this arrangement is for people who are unable to pay the cost. It's not for those who are unwilling to pay the cost. You see the difference. The cost of the course has become a really important source of financial support for this entire operation. So those who can afford the cost of the course, who just don't want to pay the cost of the course. I respect that. Obviously, the course is not that important to you if that's the case. And I respect it. It doesn't hurt my feelings. I don't feel bad about you or anything. For those who are under financial difficulty, I don't want you to miss out because you're under financial difficulty, and I do not want to add to your humiliation. So anyway, that was an announcement that I made in episode 4. Many who've taken the course who are also longtime listeners of the Last Symptom podcast have expressed the same thing. Namely, that before taking the fundamentals course, they couldn't really imagine what advantage it could offer over simply listening to the Last Symptom podcast every week. However, having taken the course, the vast majority of tell me that it sped up their recovery dramatically. It allowed them to fully see and grasp important things that until now had eluded them, even after listening to the Last Symptom podcast time after time. And I think the reason for that is really the structured way that it's laid out. A lot of imagery. It's a slideshow that I'm giving as I'm doing it, videos, presenting examples and word pictures and things like that. So it really goes beyond the Last Symptom podcast, in ways that I just can't do in an audio format. To enroll in the fundamentals course or take it yourself, of course, visit thelastsymptom.com. It's in the paid services tab of the site. Episode 5. It was titled The Third Most Important Episode to Date. Did it live up to the hype? I don't know. It was important to me. And I felt like it was a really important element for anybody dealing with family, primarily. But we talked about violators of boundaries and something that I call the law of genuine attitude reflection, which I just love it. I love because it's so simple, and yet it expresses something so profound. And I'll give you a little clue if you haven't heard that episode. If I see you playing with dynamite and I say, buddy, that's dynamite. And you go, yeah, I know. And you're sitting there juggling a few sticks of it, tossing bags of it around, no care at all. And that's dynamite. What does that reveal? What does that reflect about your attitude about dynamite? Well, very naturally, it reflects that you think that your attitude is that dynamite is really not much to worry about, right? Because if your attitude were that dynamite is something very serious and you've got to take it very serious and it's something to be very serious about, then what would your behavior reflect? It would naturally reflect you taking great care with that dynamite, right? I call that the attitude or the law of genuine attitude reflection. So we can look out at people and we can watch their behaviors and deduce with almost 100% certainty what underlying attitudes they live with. It's pretty deep, isn't it? I mean, that's something that you can continue getting better at and working on. Making those connections. It's 2 plus 2 is what it is. 2 plus 2. But we talked about that. We talked about it in regards to ourselves, in regards to our parents, in regards to violators of boundaries. And it was a really good discussion. It was so important because it revealed the unhealthy attitudes that violators of boundaries are living with and how to handle the situations like that. But remember that, the law of genuine attitude reflection, really important point there in episode 5. In episode 6, we discussed why you're so critical of your body and the stresses of being observed in public or being observed at all. We talked about the root causes of those things, what you can do to fix them for real. Episode 7 was nice. That was my interview with Emma. In fact, that episode is titled My Evening with Emma. And I received a lot of really nice feedback from that episode. A lot of people were endeared to Emma. I still have people mention that episode, and they responded really well to the opportunity of getting to hear her talk about her experiences, her struggles, and her positive attitude. Skipping ahead a bit, in episode 9, we talked about what self-sufficiency really means. Does it mean that I can go up into outer space without a spacesuit? Does it mean that I can live just fine without things like food and water because I'm totally self-sufficient? Well, of course it doesn't mean that. But then what does self-sufficiency really mean and involve? Well, you'll have to go back and listen to that episode. See how I'm reeling you in there? Or listen to the episode again for the answer. Episode 10 was billed as another special. And if I had to pick just one episode of the entire 3rd season of the Last Symptom podcast, it would be episode 10. Yeah. My personal favorite. I feel like that was the one that was packed with the most profound and life-changing, possibly life-changing insights. It was episode 10, Black and White Thinking, Splitting. That episode was so important, and it offered so many profound insights that I actually surprised myself when I was working on it. I actually surprised myself when I was working on the outline for that show. It just come together for me, and I was able to really express and go deeper than I thought I was even going to be able to when I started out. I myself have re-listened to that show various times, just because the insights in it are so good. And it's not credit to me. I'm just saying that the credits are the insights. Nobody has a monopoly on those. But the show come together so well, and offered so many profound insights that they're worth refreshing yourself on and meditating on frequently. It's one of those episodes that a person can not only get, the immediate insights from, but they're the type of insights that can keep you thinking and building up on for a long, long time. What other sorts of things did we talk about this year? Well, we talked about John Wayne masculinity. We talked about dogs some more. You know how emotional I get about my dog, old dog Bratty. I was crying thinking about him getting old 2 years ago. Now, imagine what a sort of emotional roller coaster I go through now when I talk about him. Talked about quiet BPD. We talked about the sense of persistent worthlessness. I just had a phone call with somebody who scheduled a phone call with me to talk about that very subject, persistent worthlessness. So for anybody who's dealing with that feeling of emptiness, that it's really what it's like. It's like a bucket with no bottom. You go out, you try to find things to fill that bucket. You buy yourself new things. You achieve more achievements. You get a more beautiful girlfriend or a more handsome boyfriend. You buy a brand new house, and you still feel like a bucket with no bottom in it. Persistent worthlessness. That episode is for you. It's precisely what I talked about, precisely what has given birth to that phenomenon and how to address it for real. Then we had a 4-episode series, so 4 weeks in a row, where I interviewed alumni of the Last Symptom Fundamentals course in detail to get in-depth feedback about, their experience of taking in the course, what it was like for them, some of the individual circumstances that they're all dealing with in their lives. Of course, because this was a year ago, if you can imagine it, a year ago. Can you imagine how much further ahead in their own recoveries these folks now are? Because they took the Last Symptom Intensive Fundamentals course, which goes way beyond the Last Symptom podcast in ways that I can't, that the format of the podcast just does not allow. They come out of that saying our lives are changed. And now it's been a year. So imagine how much further along they are now. I can tell you, I have some stories. Would you like to hear them? One person in particular has considered herself, see if I can get there we go. So one of the students who went through that course a year ago has considered herself completely free of borderline personality disorder, authentically, full and clear, since December 2020. I talked to her at one point and I said, I don't think you have borderline personality disorder anymore. Because in my personal circumstances, I hung on to the notion that I did have it because I was so used to living with it. It had been over 35 years, been 36, 37 years, something like that. And so I was always working with the understanding that I still got this. But then when I stopped to think about when the last time that I had worked like on autopilot due to the underlying causes of borderline personality disorder, I realized it had been like a year, and never had that happened before in my life. Then I started paying attention to myself and really considering the fact that it was gone. Now, maybe what I was dealing with was just normal human imperfection stuff, the human condition. I was still going to keep making mistakes. Things were the real test was, could I trace back a behavior or a feeling to the root causes of borderline personality disorder? If I could, I still had borderline personality disorder. If I could not, I was free of it. Well, I watched myself for a while. So it was like another 6 months that I watched myself. That was when I realized I no longer had borderline personality disorder. And it was so subtle and so gradual like that I don't even have a date for you. I mean, I can tell you the year, but I can't tell you a date. And this is, so I explained this to her. This is probably what you're going through right now. You've just been so used to being somebody with borderline personality disorder that maybe it's not occurred to you that you need to start observing yourself and seeing if you can trace anything back to the root causes of borderline personality disorder. If you can't, you don't have borderline personality disorder. So she went through the course. She's come through. She's the first person who I identify as being completely cured based on on my teachings, the Last Symptom, all the work that I've put in. She's the first. She's not the only one. Do you remember, let me see. Yeah. Do you remember that I often say that it took me 7 years? It's like, you probably hear that in your dreams. I say it so much. It took me 7 years unnecessarily to recover from borderline personality disorder myself. Why was that? Misdirection, sorting through bullshit, trying to figure things out on my own, trying to sort through all these, erroneous, false notions and ideals about what borderline personality disorder is, and so on and so forth. And do you also remember that one of my primary reasons for creating the last symptom in the first place was to help others achieve the same thing for themselves that I had, but in less time? This person who says that she has considered herself completely cured since December, that's her words, not mine. She did it in 2 years. 2 years. So that's a big deal. This beloved member of the last symptom, who's now doing great things for herself, actually achieved this, doing it in much less time than what I did it. Although the credit goes almost entirely to her, and she's the one who had to put in all the work, the last symptom did facilitate her efforts and shortened the time for her dramatically. And now she's passing it on to others the same as I did. It is really thrilling things. It's been a really nice year, despite a worldwide pandemic. And she's not the only one. Others from those interviews, that 4 episode series that I did, others from those interviews have expressed tremendous leaps in their own recoveries and have never looked back. If you ask them today, a year later, about the experience of having gone through the fundamentals course, they credit the last symptom fundamentals course as being the moment that their lives took a sharp turn and began to change for real after years, in many cases, of just sinking in quicksand. This time their changes have been for real and permanent and for the better. So this is just another aspect of the last symptom that my critics just consistently ignore when they're busy putting down me and my work. First, they discredit the fact that I ever had borderline personality disorder. Well, when that doesn't hold water, because it's ridiculous and it's obvious that I did. When that doesn't work, they discredit the fact that I actually recovered from it. And when this approach also doesn't hold water, they taunt the manner in which I recovered from it. I actually read a review the other day. A guy says, this guy, he says he recovered just by get this, just thinking his way out of it. So if I did it, you can do it too, but he doesn't want to believe that, it's too much work for him. I want to do it. He would rather hang on to the things that he makes him comfortable. So they taunt all these things, but how can they ignore the fact that the last symptom is helping other people rid themselves of these emotional disorders in authentic and permanent ways? How can they discredit that? Some of these people have spent years, I'm talking about the critics, years in universities studying these things, or some of the critics have spent years suffering from these things themselves and have never made one iota of authentic improvement. And the ones in the universities, they've never helped a person authentically. It's all just superficial, pretend progress. These people who are unhealthy and hurting, continuing to live with the underlying causes of their disorders and relying on superficial tricks to get by day. I could have been in that situation very easily I could have been in that situation, but I'm just stubborn and I wasn't going to take a superficial answer like that was sufficient. So many unhappy, unhealthy people who are so passionate about clinging to popularly accepted explanations that have never helped them in any real way in the slightest amount. You would think that after 10 years in therapy, think about it, 10 years in therapy, that's the low number. Many of these critics have told me, I've been in therapy for 15 years, 20 years. You don't know what you're talking about. You've been in therapy for 20 years, have not gotten better, and I don't know what I'm talking about? No end in sight. You would think that it would occur to a person like that, that the information that they're trusting in cannot possibly be accurate if it hasn't produced a single real result. But no, that's not what happens. They will go to battle defending those teachings and ideals and false information. It's astonishing. So I'm going to have to move on because this I've got so much information. But these critics are composed of three different groups of people that I've noticed. Number one, some, not all, but some, a majority in the professional community who are too arrogant to learn from somebody who's not in their imaginary social class and has not been indoctrinated from the same secondary or third sources as they. Listen, they've paid a lot of money to know what they know. They've paid a lot of money to know what they know. And their arrogance will not allow them to consider that what they paid to learn is not accurate. Number two, unhealthy folks who are consumed by shame because they still have the disorder. They've not gotten better, but they're not interested in putting forth the effort to get better in a real way. And what does that do? It contributes to more shame. I call it the wheel of shame. So they're already living in shame. They're kind of comfortable in their misery, comfortable in their disorder. They don't want to do the work. They know that that's what they're doing, that they have the option of getting free of that, but they don't want to put in the work, and then that kicks in more shame. And then they've got that wheel of shame going. And because they feel so much shame, they lash out at me and the last symptom. And then there's the group of people that I like to call the know-it-all, know-it-nothings. You guys can borrow that if you want. The know-it-all, know-it-nothings. I come up with that myself. And these are just everyday people. They've read a few things on these topics. And so now they believe that they're experts primarily because of the blind, complete faith that they have in everything they read. If they see it repeated enough times, if they see it in enough books, they say, that's the truth right there. I know because I saw it lots of times in lots of books. And then they won't listen to me. So there's the three groups of critics. But back to some of the rich discussions and insights that we had this year in this season of the Last Symptom podcast. There was the epic Facebook live stream that I held in the middle of the woods on a winter night right around my fire. The temperature was in the low 20s Fahrenheit. For you folks outside the US, that's that's minus 6.7 degrees Celsius. So it was cold that night. Everybody can still watch that video here on YouTube. I think it's still posted here. But it's season 3, episode 19, Palavering by a Fire in the Woods. And the reason why that episode was so nice is because that was like an entire season of The Last Symptom in a single episode. We talked about everything that night. I was laid back. There were lots of participants. I was relaxed. In my natural habitat, I had my 2 dogs with me. Had a bottle of bourbon, Kentucky bourbon with me. It was nice. We were laid back and comfortable and just having a good time. But it's 2 hours long. So it's kind of like the Schindler's List of the Last Symptom podcast episodes. Things you never say to those with BPD was the topic the week after our big live stream in the woods. And then after that, there was another incredibly important episode. I should have listed it as a special episode because it's one of the most important I've ever recorded. The problem is that I can't list every single episode as a special episode, because and then special loses all meaning, you know. But every episode is sort of a special episode. Lynn was there, yeah, and Penny. Penny says natural habitat. LOL. Do you folks remember that night around that fire, I kept saying I need to get my tent up or a shelter or something. I never did. I never did. When I finished that live stream, I had something laying down on the ground, but I just laid right down on the ground and fell asleep. And the dogs come up, got up underneath my sleeping bag, and I fell asleep right on the ground. No tent, no nothing. I forgot to tell people that. That was the night of the live stream in the woods at 20 degrees. Usually the ground will suck the heat right out of you. But I had something under me, but it was enough that I stayed perfectly warm once I got the dogs up underneath the sleeping bag with me, and I fell asleep right by the fire. There's another story that happened that night. I got up in the middle of the night. Well, it was early morning, probably 4 o'clock in the morning. Got up to drain the old one-eyed lizard over by the tree line, and the dogs were fighting to stay warm underneath my sleeping bag, and they pushed it down into the fire. So when I come back, it had burned a hole through my goose down sleeping bag, and there was goose down flying everywhere. That took forever for me to clean up, and I had to clean it up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So there's a little side gem for you for that live stream. All right. After the live stream, things you never say to those with BPD. Okay, and then after that was this very important episode, probably one of the most important I've ever done. That was season 3, episode 23. Love's the answer, but not how you think. In that episode, I explained precisely why throwing love at people with emotional disorders, even though it's very nice, I'm not saying don't do it, but I explained exactly why that's an exercise in futility. And exactly what has to happen in order for love offered to have a positive effect for people with emotional disorders. That's such an important episode, and one that I wish would go viral and save the world. But unfortunately, with all things involved in emotional health, the most powerful points in that episode are subtle, and they go against common wisdom and the unhealthy world that we live in. Really does not do well with things that they have to spend time thinking about honestly, or that goes against the things that they're already comfortable thinking. Complexity versus simplicity. Self-sufficiency. What exactly does it mean when we say that your feelings always matter? And what exactly does this not mean? Logical fallacies. More personal details of my past life with borderline personality disorder. What healthy relationships look like. The formula for authentic recovery. All of these things we discussed in great detail this year and provided concrete answers and insights on them. Season 3, episode 30 was another special episode. It was titled The Fourth Most Important Episode to Date, and that was financial responsibility. I worked very hard on that episode, and I did so in the interest of those who struggle financially and could benefit from having things explained to them that I wish somebody had explained to me in the way that I explained it in that particular episode. Season 3, episode 31, when to confront your parents, when not to. And then skipping ahead just a bit, season 3, episode 36, how to identify and reject shame. This episode is so important because time and time again, you've heard me say that human beings don't possess a capacity to control what we feel. It's not like I can choose to be happy, just like flipping a switch. If I'm not happy, I'm not happy. I can't just choose to flip a switch and be happy. This is the whole reason that the notion of emotional regulation is such horseshit. Nobody is walking around with this amazing power to regulate their feelings. Nobody does that. It's not a thing. We can regulate our thoughts and we can regulate our outward behaviors, but we can't regulate or control what we feel and the intensities in which we're feeling those things. Nobody can. Doesn't matter if you're the healthiest person in the world. So it's a destructive, blatant lie from the professional community telling these poor people who are out there believing that their problem rests with their feelings and that they should be able to regulate their feelings. They go to a therapist and spend $200 per hour to get answers and insights, and the person says, "Oh, you need to learn to regulate your feelings." Well, guess what, shithead? Nobody can regulate their feelings. Give me my $200 back. That should be the response of every single person. But in this episode, I talked about rejecting shame. So the reason why this episode is so important is because a person might say, "Well, what is it, Barnett? Can I control what I feel or not?" So how am I supposed to reject shame if I can't control what I feel? Well, that episode, season 3, episode 36, How to Identify and Reject Shame, explains exactly how one rejects shame. And no, it does not involve being able to control our feelings and just change them into something else, whatever we want. So if you haven't heard that episode yet, please consider downloading it. Season 3, episode 38 special, the happiness episode. We talked about contentment versus happiness. There's an important difference. Did you know that? There's an important difference between contentment versus happiness. You might think you want one, but I'm pretty sure you want the other. In that episode, we also discussed people not knowing that they're not happy. 20 signs that you're not really happy, even if you think you are. Followed by why people who think they're happy are not really happy. And finally, we discussed genuinely happy people. What's that all about? What's the secret? What are they doing different? Another one of the most important episodes of this 3rd season of the Last Symptom podcast was season 3, episode 42. That was another special. It was one that was near and dear to my heart because if you've been listening to me, especially on the orange slices that I do every day now, you know that insight, I think, is above everything else. Knowledge is nice. Wisdom is great. All these things that we all aspire for are great. Nothing goes above insight. Without insight, everything else is subpar. So that was season 3, episode 38. I'm sorry. Let's see here. No, that wasn't season 3, episode 38. We just got done talking about that. That was episode 42, season 3, episode 42, titled Insight. So what is it? Why is it such a rarity? How does it keep millions of people every year from authentically escaping emotional disorders? How does the professional community as a group, I'm not beating up on every single member, but why do they as a group, how do they contribute to this? And why is insight a non-negotiable ingredient for authentic recovery from any emotional disorder? Finally, a couple weeks ago, in season 3, episode 45, We all but finished up the season by talking about beware of life coaches. A lot of people might have said, well, he's got some nerve being a life coach, telling people to beware of life coaches. You know, the last symptom exists practically in a flood of people out there giving advice. So in that episode, I discussed how you can distinguish between what is practically useful to you and genuinely beneficial from what is not. I didn't tell you, give up all those guys and just listen to the last symptom. In fact, I made it a point to say that I'm not discouraging you from all life coaches. I just gave you some principles to look for and some practical advice for when you do encounter life coaches, a sort of a test that you can do very easily to see if there's somebody who's worth your time or not. That's all. And just thinking about your best interests. So that is an abbreviated look at the third season of the Last Symptom podcast. You know, it's sad. It's sad to me that the third season is drawn to a close. And isn't that true for anything? Anything we do in life? You know, you finish fifth grade in grade school. That's sad. It's not like school is over. You're still going to school the next year. But it's sad that fifth grade will never happen again. Do you guys experience that too? So that's what I'm feeling right now. I worked hard at the third season. There were episodes that I worked harder on than others, depending on the time and the energy, my resources for that week. But you know, I know that the third season will never happen again. It's something that I put effort into, and now it's done. Almost. We got a few more things to talk about here, but I hope that this review has given you some healthy reminders of the things we've discussed this year, this season. Or perhaps this has drawn your attention to some good things that you possibly missed out on. You know, the ending of anything is better than its beginning. Did you know that? I know that many of you are not religious. And so me saying that the Bible tells us so probably won't carry a lot of weight, but the Bible tells us so. It says that the end of a matter is better than its beginning. And if you respect the Bible as being a source of at least some really profound wisdom, that's one to think about. So even though I'm a little bit sad that the third season is ending, guess what else I feel? I feel a lot of exciting things about the fourth season, because I feel like, man, I have 3 years of experience doing this now. I have exactly one night of experience doing YouTube live streams. So I'm already wiser than I was just an hour ago. So I have a lot of reasons to be excited for this brand new fourth season of the Last Symptom podcast coming up. Would you folks like to know what things I have in mind to discuss for this upcoming fourth season? See what everybody says in the chats there. Would you like to know some of the topics that I've kind of worked out to talk about in this fourth season? Michael says yes. Really, that's just a technique to allow me to rest my voice for a second and take a drink. Well, as far as changes go, thank you, Pam. Thank you, Penny. I appreciate that. Before we talk about the topics that I'm thinking about discussing in this upcoming fourth season, maybe you're wondering about any changes that I might have in mind for the format of the show and everything. Well, let me just tell you, I have no intention to change the theme music like I did from the first season to the second. When I did that, I lost 1,000 subscribers overnight. And I kid you not. When I changed the theme music from the first season to the second season, I lost 1,000, not 100, 1,000 subscribers from one day to the next. So definitely not tinkering with the theme music no more. In fact, when I was reviewing, the episodes of this season, uh, my daughter kept coming into the room. She was in there watching a movie or something, playing with her toys. She kept coming in at the beginning of every show. I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Daddy, I just really like that music." And she's talking about the theme music for the last Symptom podcast. So I'm not messing with that no more. It seems to work. I kind of hit on gold there. So I'm not changing that. I am kind of serious about shortening the episodes. What happened in the third season? I was enjoying myself so much that I was telling a lot of stories. I was trying to be more personable with my audience. And some people like that. But for others who really want the value of the insights, it kind of puts a time pressure on them, right? They're listening to me on their way to work, or they've got so much time in a day or in a week. And these episodes were going an hour and 20 minutes and so forth. And so I kind of get the feeling that there are many people who would like a shorter time format. So I've kind of decided that, unless I get a lot of people saying, no, don't do it. Keep it at the length that it's at. Unless that happens, I think I'm going to try for like a 30-minute format for the fourth season. So you guys can let me know what you think about that. That's about the only change I'm really going to make. Remember that I'm doing daily orange slices now. Pamela likes the longer episodes. Well, I appreciate that. They take it's a lot more work, but it's work that I enjoy. I like telling the stories and kind of letting my hair down and being personable and stuff like that. Remember that I'm doing the daily orange slices now. So if you don't know what orange slices are, if you haven't heard of these, they're daily condensed video insights that are typically 5 to 10 minutes in length, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. They publish exclusively to the Last Symptom community on the Locals platform. So Facebook, I'm maintaining it, and I'm still allowing people to join that group, but I'm very inactive there, very inactive. All my attention is going to Locals, and that's where the majority of my attention goes. So the Orange Slice videos, these condensed video insights, they publish exclusively to the Locals platform. You can join our community there, which has replaced and greatly improved upon, I think, the Facebook group, the old Facebook group, by going to the Last Symptom dot locals locals.com, thelastsymptom.locals.com. Or you can download the locals.com app and search for The Last Symptom. We'd love to have you folks there. It's a very tight group. There are almost 400 people in that group. But the really active ones, we're talking about 20 people who are very active. And so just like in Facebook, there's a lot of lurkers, but it's a much more intimate and tight group. Michael says that I like the longer episodes, just don't always have time to finish in one sitting. I can see the value of shorter version. The first season was because I was recording all the shows on an iPad, and all the memory I had on that iPad would only allow me about a 20-minute show for the first season of the Last Symptom podcast. And the popularity of that show just exploded off the charts. At one point, I was within 200, top 200 most popular shows in the United States. I'm not right now. And the longer episodes might have something to do with that. Again, popularity is not my interest. If I were the most popular, I'd say, well, I must be saying things that everybody agrees with. And that's not my job to do. My job is to tell people things they don't want to hear. So I should expect a smaller, more intimate group. All right, topics for this upcoming 4th season. Let me see what you guys think about this, all right? All right, I keep a running list. Now, here's what I'd like you folks to do. If you don't hear the topic in here that you would like for me to address, get in touch with me at Brian Barnett at thelastsymptom.com. You can get in touch with me through the website. But here are the topics that I've had in mind. And some of these topics I've been trying to get around to talking about since the very first season, believe it or not. Number 1. Yeah, Joy says it's funny that the limits of my technology determine my format. Hey, you do what you can with what you got. For those folks who have supported The Last Symptom over the years, my ability to do this is thanks to those people who have supported The Last Symptom. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do this with an iPad. So as funds have come in supporting The Last Symptom, I've used those funds to improve upon some of the technology and the things, donations and the support through thelastsymptom.com. The folks who support my work allow me to have a website. They have allowed me to expand my work. They've allowed me to update my technology. They've allowed me to do everything to expand The Last Symptom and try to improve the services that I offer. The daily orange slices, could not do it without the financial support of the Last Symptom community. So you've seen the improvement, I hope, in the presentation value and everything like that as the years have passed. And it's all thanks to people who support The Last Symptom. So here we go. Topics for the upcoming 4th season. Number 1, how is emotional health and morality unrelated? Number 2, hoarding. Number 3, the Truth Project in the United Kingdom. And while I'm talking about that, I would like to go into great detail and talk about the intensity and damage of those I talked to in the UK but also the variations of the types of abuse and the intensities of abuse that I have seen in my work through the last symptom, country to country. So there are patterns. There are patterns that I've picked up on, for example, in India, in the UK, in South America, in the United States. There are obvious patterns. In fact, when I watch uh, a television show or a British movie or something from the UK, I'm constantly picking up on these things because a lot of the folks that I talk to are from the UK. Same thing with like Central and South America. There are patterns that I picked up on. India, things I pick up on. Let me see. I can't see the screen there. Deer hunter. All right. Thank you for sticking with me as long as you did. Appreciate it. So there are things that that's what I would like to talk about in this upcoming season. I'd like to talk about the observations I've made about patterns that I've picked up on through my large audience and the interactions that I've had with these folks and the types of things that they're dealing with that are kind of specific, not specific, but the frequency of that thing being so common. There are things that are common in the UK that are more common in the UK than I see, for example, in India. But then there are things that are more common in India than what I see in the United States or in the UK. And there are observations like that I've made. Number 4, hope versus expectation. Hope versus expectation. Number 5, suicide. That is going to be a special episode. I've been hanging on to that since the first season. The suicide episode. And one of the reasons is that it's going to take great care for me. The suicide episode is going to be like the sex episode. I'm just going to have to spend a lot of time on it and handle it with great care and wisdom in order to present it in the best way. And so that's going to be a biggie. Suicide is one that I've been wanting to really iron out for a long time. Number 6, the dangers and causes of being critical, negative, and practical ways to escape it. Number 7, things that seem to be good and it seems to be done for another person, but that are really done for oneself. So selfish and done in self-interest, but presented sacrificing. Number 8, reputation. Your reputation is one of the things in life, and you have to safeguard it with your life practically. Where I'm from, they say without your reputation, you're nothing. Without a good reputation, you're nothing. But is that really the right place to have your focus and importance on your reputation? I've got a lot to say about that. Number 9, coming to see people as people rather than suppliers or deniers of our own wants or needs. 10, facts plus their implications, spending time drawing out the implications rather than simply taking things at face value and then just moving on. Number 11, people who seem to celebrate and have sort of a secret pride in their emotional disorders. I see this in Quora. I mean, it's like there's like an army of locusts of people like this on Quora. People who wear their emotional disorders on their sleeve like some kind of badge of honor. Not doing anything to get better, but they're proud. They're proud of their emotional disorder. I'm sure you folks have seen that too. Number 12, hearing what is not there. I can't see. I'm an old man. Being healthy and setting boundaries within workplace settings. Okay. Let me make a note of it. Setting boundaries within workplace settings. I got a pencil around here somewhere. Here, let's do. Setting boundaries. Well, just let me point out right here that setting boundaries is not the thing. Anybody can set a boundary. So what we really want to talk about is enforcing boundaries in the workplace, not setting them, but enforcing them. Okay, so really, it's enforcing, following through. All right, thank you for that. Let me see. Boy, my eyes are bad tonight. Okay, so that was from Joy. All right, so then we talked about hearing what's not there, inserting our own meaning or messaging when it's not really there. Number 13, the two very different types of support being offered every day to those with emotional disorders. Distinguish between those two different types of support and figure out which one we're going to live by. 14, couples therapy. Number 15, dissociation. 16, cost benefit analysis. Cost benefit analysis. How you can use this specifically in authentic recovery from emotional disorders, and how you can continue to use this in everyday life. Number 17, suppliers or deniers of one's own wants and needs and all of the implications of this. Number 18, mind reading. Mind reading. How to spot it happening all around you, why it's the epitome of emotional unhealth, and how you can avoid the tendency yourself, and how you can protect or respond to it happening to you from somebody else. Number 19, forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself. A lot of times what do you think? What do you think? Is it more important to gain the forgiveness of other people, or is it more important to be able to forgive yourself? Something to think about. What would really free you and breathe life back into you? Getting forgiveness from somebody else, or being able to forgive yourself? That's really what it comes down to. Being able to forgive yourself. We spend years torturing ourselves because of an inability to forgive ourselves. Much longer and much harder than when we just don't get the forgiveness of somebody else. Number 20, stress. Stress. 21, suffering in silence. 22, the inherent balances in life from being emotionally healthy. In that episode, we'll talk about how we never expect anything from others that we don't also expect of ourselves, and vice versa, and how that works. 23, additional uses for the why exercise, which I introduced to y'all back in the first season of the Last Symptom podcast. Number 24, the apology process. I'm going to give you a solid format for the apology process in great detail, all the reasons why it has to be done a certain way, at a certain time, with certain conditions in place, or not at all. The apology process. And finally, masks. Number 25, masks. And no, I'm not talking about the kind worn during pandemics. So those are the topics that I've been hanging on to for next season. I've got 2 stories to tell you folks. Let's see if you folks have anything you want to say before I tell the stories, and then we'll tell the stories, and then we'll wrap up. Lynn, I think, has just given us a little poem snippet there. She says, "Yourself, I always remind myself when you know better, you do better." By Maya Angelou. Dickie says, "Love your stories." Well, I've saved these, because this is the last episode. These are going to be goodies. And it's so late that I don't have to censor myself, do I, Dickie? Given my live stream family here, it's time to say anything they want to say. While we're waiting here, let me just say that there will not be a new episode of the Last Symptom podcast next week. That is next Thursday. I'm going to take a week off, kind of recharge, get ready for the 4th season. I want the 4th season to be the best one yet. Michael, I appreciate it too. I appreciate it. I appreciate that you found the Last Symptom too. And I appreciate that you appreciate my efforts and my work. It means a whole lot to me. The numbers have really diminished since I've made a bunch of structural changes here lately. So the folks that have continued to stick with the Last Symptom and have followed me from one place to another, I really appreciate that. Dickie, are you asking if I've gone camping lately, or if my stories are about camping? Oh, I see what you're saying. You're asking if I'm going camping next weekend instead of recording the show. No, I would just like to, as this season has gone on, I got to a point where it's been week to week for me. That's why I didn't have a show last week. And my preference would be to have some time to be out ahead of the work a bit. So if I take a week off, I'm still going to be working. It's just that will allow me like a cushion. So if I need to travel or something like that, I won't have to miss an episode. I'll have things in the bank. In other words. What else? Okay, so the next episode after this episode will be August 19th. August 19th. And that will be the first episode of the 4th season of the Last Symptom podcast. On Thursday, as always. And while we're kind of building up here to the stories, let me tell you about the lastsymptom.com. There's lots of free resources there. Hope you folks will take advantage of them. There's some paid resources too, as I mentioned through the show tonight. That's what has allowed me to not only do my work, but improve upon it over the last few years. So if you're so inclined to have a one-on-one conversation with me, either on the phone or on Zoom, you can schedule that through the lastsymptom.com. There's the fundamentals course. If you have to choose between a phone conversation with me and taking the fundamentals course, I hope you'll save up your pennies and take the fundamentals course, because because frankly, I think that it can do mountains more good than just a single phone call with me can. The fundamentals course can alter the trajectory of your life. I kind of feel strange telling people that because it's like a salesman type pitch, right? But it's true. It's really true. It can change the trajectory of your life. So if you have to choose between a phone call with me and the Last Symptom course, I'd rather you waited a week or two and save up some pennies and take the Last Symptom course for your own good. Donations. Donations continue to be an important aspect of what supports what I do. So no pressure there. I don't want anybody to feel pressured about that. Just do it if you feel like it. And that's all I'll say about that. You can do that from thelastsymptom.com if you're so inclined. And that's it. You ready for the stories? First of all, I want to tell you about the greatest spelling error of all time. I was working in Philadelphia. I think it was like my second year in Philadelphia. And I was working as a freelance Spanish interpreter in the hospitals. So the office was up kind of in, what area was that in? See if I can remember it off the top of my head. Bensalem. So the office for my interpreting agency was up around Bensalem. This big, it's changed a lot. I mean, they've built a lot of things there. A casino. There's a big casino in Bensalem now, and that was only there for like it had just moved in like the last 2 years that I was there. But anyway, anybody from the Philly area knows Bensalem. The interpreting agency that I worked for was located there in Bensalem, and so they would send me from hospital to hospital from there. I didn't have to check in at the agency. I would just get up in the morning and they would email me my assignments. So then I would travel to this hospital and travel to that hospital and then travel to this hospital. That's how I made my living back in those days. And one day I was sitting at the hospital, and the girl who would always give me my assignments for the day, I saw that I got an email from her, and I was sitting in the waiting area of a hospital waiting to go on to my next job. And I opened up this email from her, and she said, "Hi, Brian, this is not a job assignment or anything. This is just a personal request." So she knew that I was an artist, and she wanted me to draw her something. So she had sent me this email, and the email read, I kid you not, this is what it said, word for word. It said, "Can you draw a picture for my niece of a fairy shitting in the woods, hugging her knees? Can you draw a picture?" I read it again. I actually sitting in the hospital, I read it again like, what? "Can you draw a picture for my niece of a fairy shitting in the woods, hugging her knees?" Greatest spelling error of all time, or autocorrect error, whatever you want to call it. What she meant to say was, will you draw a picture for my niece of a fairy sitting in the woods, hugging her knees? Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, that's a true story. Oh, man. I laughed so hard. I said, sure. I'm sure I can draw that picture. So, next story. As a Spanish interpreter who did not grow up speaking Spanish, Michael says that I draw both. I got in touch with her. I didn't figure it out. I should have known that she meant sitting, but I sent her an email back, and I'm like, "What? What? Are you serious? This is what you want me to draw?" Man, she was so embarrassed. Mm. And she and I are still friends. I mean, we're not friends, but she finds me on social media every once in a while and sends me a request, and we've kept in touch over the years. I think that's been real nice. She's had some rough times in her life. Um, I know that somebody that was very near and dear to her died. I think she went through a divorce, things like that, and it's just strange, you know. It's strange what time does, because back during that time, I I was in the throes of borderline personality disorder. That's the only person she's ever known, was me with borderline personality disorder. And so every interaction and everything that I knew about her at that time, I was interpreting through a certain filter, you know. And now I'm don't have that, and so my interactions with her are totally different. I ask a lot more questions. I wonder a lot more things about her now and from then. Like, what what did I overlook back then about her? About just like the type of person she is and stuff like that. Anyway, I give a lot more thought to people nowadays. What makes them them, you know, and how privileged I was to have spent a certain amount of time around that person very closely. How I wish I had a time machine and could do it again. Um, you know, given my current state rather than the state I was in back then. So back to this story about me speaking Spanish as a gringo who become a Spanish interpreter. We're under a lot of pressure, you know, us gringos who learn Spanish and work as interpreters in the United States. We're under a lot of pressure because if you're Hispanic or Latino and you just barely speak Spanish, you you get given a lot more leeway than I do, being white and having not grown up in a Spanish speaking house. I have to prove myself 10 times more than a person who is legitimately, you know, like come from a Latino family, has Latino blood, grew up having Spanish around them. That doesn't mean they speak it better than me. It just means that they're considered legitimate and I'm not. So, and I would say that any white um, non-Spanish speaking raised person would, you know, if they're not afraid of offending anybody, if they're being honest, they will tell you this. You have to work about 10 times harder to get the same amount of respect. So I worked hard, man. I worked hard. It was just like any of these folks that you see playing music at Carnegie Hall, you know, how hard have they had to practice the violin or the fiddle or whatever to get into Carnegie Hall? You know, they're working under such scrutiny that to just get there, they have to work very hard and take it very seriously. And that's what I did with Spanish, and particularly with interpreting. So that was my experience as an interpreter, was just constantly nose to the grindstone, man. I just thought about it all the time. I studied medical terminology all the time. Even medical terminology I knew I was never going to encounter, and it just took it very seriously. So that's the setup. Everything I did as a professional interpreter was I took it very seriously. And one day I was working with this Mexican woman in the hospital. I'd been working with her for a while. She'd had a stroke, and so the left side of her body, she couldn't operate the left side of her body, and she was in a wheelchair. And I would be with her every day, in physical therapy. And she had two very beautiful daughters, very young, um, very Catholic, young, beautiful daughter. And they would always come every day and they'd work with her mom and their mom and everything like that. So one day after physical therapy, her mom says, "Would you like a coffee? Why don't you come down to the cafeteria with us and have coffee?" And I said, "Well, I'd love to. I don't have anything on my schedule, so yeah, that'd be great." So we started, the daughters were pushing her in the wheelchair. I think we were up on the 4th floor of the hospital. This is in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. I worked at a hospital there in Elkins Park for many, many years, almost 10 years. So anyway, we start walking. We're talking as we walk along, and we take the elevator down to the bottom floor, and we're walking toward the cafeteria. And I look up ahead, and I see that they've got the gate pulled across the cafeteria. The cafeteria is not open. So I said to the mom and to the daughters, I said in Spanish, "I don't think we can get in there. You see, they've got the gate extended. I don't think we can get in there." And they started laughing. Their faces turned beet red. Those young daughters who were like 19, 20-ish, their faces turned beet red. But I'm telling you, this is like a very Catholic family. And they were laughing. The mom was laughing in the wheelchair. She's like turning her head so that I can't see her laughing. And I said, "What's so funny?" I said, "No, I'm serious. I don't think we can get in there. The cafeteria is closed. That's why they've got the gate extended across the entrance of the cafeteria. We can't get in there." Oh man, they bust out laughing again. I mean, they're crying. There's literal tears coming down their faces. And I thought to myself, what am I saying wrong? And I did kind of a review in my mind of the vocabulary I was using in Spanish, and I thought, I swear I'm using all the right terminology. So I said it one more time. "Girls," I said, "I don't know what you're laughing about, if it's my pronunciation or what, but we can't get into we can't get in. They've got the gate extended." Oh man, that was enough. The mom with the stroke, she is literally like fallen out of the wheelchair at this point. And her daughters are like trying to hold her up. She's laughing that hard. And the daughters are laughing. And I'm totally confused about what I have said that has got these girls all in a titter. So I pull out my phone, and I had a dictionary, bilingual dictionary on my phone. And I thought, I'm almost positive that the word I'm using for gate is the right word. So I look it up in that dictionary, the word that I was using. And the word that I was using was cock, like dick. And the word was verga. And now you understand why they were laughing so hard. Because I kept saying, no, we can't get in there. Look, they've got the cock extended. They're not going to let us in there. Look at that big cock. It's extended. We can't get in there. And man, I wanted to die. I was so embarrassed. I wanted to die. So I kept saying, no podemos entrar. Tienen la verga extendida. La verga está extendida. No podemos entrar. They kept laughing. So I went, what I was trying to say was berja, Berja. That's the way I had learned to say gate. And verga, Berga, means cock. So I went to a Mexican friend of mine. And I said, "Man, I can't. I wanted to die. I wanted to crawl under a rock and die." And he said, "What were you saying?" And I told him, "Verga. No podemos entrar. La verga está extendida." He said, "Oh my God, you were trying to say berja?" He says, "Don't say berja." He says, "Just say reja." He says, "It's much safer, and it's not going to get you into trouble." So as embarrassing as that was, every experience as a Spanish interpreter, every serious mistake I've made like that, I'll tell you, I never messed up that word again. It was the perfect learning experience. So every single embarrassing thing like that ever happened to me, it like burned these words into my memory. And then, after that, they're never again a problem. Yeah, they had a great laugh. And I'll tell you, I was so embarrassed because I knew that the daughters were these very strictly Catholic virgins. The mom and the father, the whole family was just very pure and just a great family. And so I'm friends with them to this day too. Uh, in fact, one of the daughters just got married. She almost made it to 30 before she finally got married. Lynn says she had a similar encounter speaking French in an elevator. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. You just got to take it. So, yeah, I'm friends with that family. In fact, I'm very close friends with that family. Of all the patients I ever worked with as an interpreter, I would say that they're like family almost. They're really close to me and they love me, and I'm very gracious that they do. The mom would constantly say that I was the best interpreter that she had in her whole experience of having to communicate through interpreters. To this day, she says that I was the best she had. And I can't tell you how good that makes me feel because, like I said, I worked so hard to be not a good interpreter, but a great interpreter. So, Lynn stuck in that elevator. She was trying to say, "Are you French?" But she said, "Do you French? Do you French?" So she's talking to a woman, and she was trying to say, "Are you French?" But instead, she said to this woman, "Do you French?" French kiss. Get there. All right, an hour and 47 minutes. This is going to be one of those epic episodes. So let's call it a night, folks. And after I close down here, I'm going to be on for a little bit, checking things on Facebook. I'm going to be just kind of checking things and making sure that this all gets transported everywhere it needs to go. Reach out to me. I'll be up for a little bit. Okay. Thank you so much, all of you. I really mean it, for making this live stream successful. It was really nice to have you with me. Much, much better than me just talking into a camera. Can't tell you how much more interesting and fun it is to have to look up and know that you're there and even see some comments in there and stuff. It just makes it a lot better. So thank you all. Thank you, Carlene. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Dickie. Penny, buenas noches. Que tengas buenas noches. Que descanses. Don't want to leave anybody out there. Lynn, thank you so much for being along for the ride. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.